The ship groaned like a dying beast as the wind howled through the rusted hull, rattling chains and whispering through the hollow vents. It had been docked at Pier 17 for over a decade, mostly forgotten, except by the seagulls and the occasional history enthusiast. The USS Harridan, a Cold War relic, was once a titan of the sea. Now, it sat like an aging warrior with a broken spine. Asterisk, and in the middle of that steel carcass stood Lena Torres, 40 years old, 5'7", and soaked in sweat and oil from the waist up. Asterisk, her hands, toughened by years of labor, were buried deep in the maze of pipes and components that made up the ship's engine. The room around her was cramped, filled with an oppressive heat and the smell of metal decay. She had pulled 12-hour shifts for 11 days straight, and still felt like she was only beginning to understand the magnitude of what she was attempting. Asterisk, but quitting had never been in her vocabulary. Asterisk, Lena had grown up in a small coastal town in Maine, her bedroom window facing the Atlantic. Her father, a naval mechanic before retiring early due to a back injury, had filled her childhood with stories of machines, engines that roared like dragons, turbines that sang like sirens, ships that danced through storms, while other girls played with dolls. Lena was dismantling lawnmowers and assembling miniature combustion engines. By 15, she could rebuild an outboard motor blindfolded. By 25, she was working in a government-contracted shipyard, often the only woman on the floor. Asterisk, but despite her expertise, Lena had never climbed the ranks. She had ideas, innovations, solutions, but those were often dismissed with a patronizing smile or an empty promise. You're good with your hands, Torres. Let the engineers handle the thinking. So she kept her head down and worked. That changed the day she read the Navy's internal report on the USS Harridan. The ship was to be scrapped due to a failure. In the original engine system, a unique hybrid propulsion unit, classified during the Cold War, 5 teams of engineers had attempted to repair or replicate it. All had failed. The unit was considered irreparably obsolete. The report infuriated Lena Asterisk, not because of the failure, because of the assumption. They had approached the engine like it was modern, sleek, logical, but the Harridan was built during a time when intuition and mechanical artistry mattered. Back then, engineers relied on feel as much as formula, and Lena knew she could fix it. She pushed her proposal through every chain she could find. Cold emails, formal pitches, direct pleas. It took weeks. Finally, someone in Naval Command noticed the tenacity in her voice. Or maybe they were desperate. Either way, she was summoned. Asterisk, when she stepped into the operations center in Norfolk. The room was full of suits, uniforms, and skepticism. Most of the men glanced at her coveralls with barely disguised condescension. Among them stood Admiral Walter Grayson, a stern man with a reputation for running his fleet like clockwork and his people like soldiers. Asterisk, you want to rebuild the Harridan's engine? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Asterisk, I want the chance. Lena said, just the chance. Asterisk, Grayson leaned back, arms folded. 5 teams, millions of dollars. Years of effort. You think you can do what they couldn't? Asterisk, I don't think. I know, she replied. Without blinking. Asterisk, the Admiral's eyes flicked to the project laid beside him. A man who shook his head slightly. Grayson turned back. You have 3 weeks, no budget, minimal oversight. You can bring 1 assistant. When you fail, the ship is scrapped. Asterisk, Lena didn't smile. She just said, I only need 2 weeks. Asterisk, that night, she walked aboard the Harridan like she was entering a temple. The silence, the dust, the creaking. It was intimidating, yes, but it also felt like home. The engine room had been sealed off for years, secured due to radiation, concerns, and classified components. But Lena had studied the schematics for days. She had memorized every line and scribbled note from the 1960s. She had already begun sourcing obsolete tools, and knew which parts she'd need to machine from scratch. Asterisk, she brought with her only one person, Marcy Kim, a 28-year-old engineering student who had once asked Lena a smart question during a seminar. She had grit, curiosity, and something Lena hadn't seen in most of her male colleagues, the ability to listen first and talk second. They got to work immediately. By day 3, Lena had removed over 60 pounds of rusted piping and corroded casings. She wore thick gloves, but her fingers were raw from prying, scraping, and rewiring. The engine, a bizarre blend of nuclear assist and high-efficiency diesel, was unlike anything seen today. It was built in layers, like a mechanical onion, and hidden beneath insulation and anti-surveillance shielding. Asterisk, they worked under dim lights, slept in shifts in a makeshift bunk, and ate meals out of cans. Lena didn't care. Every bolt she loosened brought her closer to the heart of the beast. Asterisk, by day 5, they found the primary failure, a rupture in the cryogenic pressure regulator, caused by thermal expansion over decades. Lena knew how to fix it, not by replacing it, but by restoring its original flexibility. She created a makeshift forge on the dock, heated and reshaped the warped titanium ring, then cooled it gradually using seawater and sand. Asterisk, on day 7, the auxiliary power junction sputtered to life for the first time in 14 years. It was barely a heartbeat, but it was a sign. Lena looked at Marcy, who had tears in her eyes. "We're waking her up," Lena said quietly, but the pressure was building. Naval officials visited on day 9, including Commander Rhodes, a sharp-tongued analyst who clearly didn't believe in Lena's efforts. "You're chasing ghosts," he said. "Even if you get the engine to purr, it'll never roar." Lena ignored him. That night, she stayed up alone, cross-referencing the original thermal diagrams with handwritten notes from a long-retired engineer named E.D. Watkins. Watkins had scrawled an equation in the corner of one page, not part of the blueprint, but a clue. It was a frequency adjustment formula. Lena ran the numbers. The engine wasn't failing because of physical damage. It was misaligned at its harmonic threshold. It was like a piano, slightly out of tune. She spent the next 48 hours adjusting turbine shafts by microns, shims, weights, and counterbalances. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She refused to sleep. By day 11, something shifted. The engine didn't just clank. It responded, like an animal testing the air after a long slumber. Lena stepped back, breathing heavily. Marcy leaned over the console, staring at the monitors. One of them flashed green. Asterisk. "Is that?" Marcy began. Asterisk. "Yeah," Lena said. "She's listening now." Asterisk. The day ended with the sound of coolant lines filling properly and the low hum of an intact pressure cycle. It was a moment Lena had dreamt about, not just fixing something broken, but resurrecting a forgotten masterpiece. Asterisk. She looked out the porthole that night at the dark waves. Asterisk. They had called her a grease monkey, a technician, a mechanic, never an engineer, never a leader. But this was hers now. And in just a few more days, the whole damn Navy would hear the Harridan roar again. The final morning dawned with a thick mist crawling off the Atlantic, rolling over the dockyards like a shroud. The gray skies matched the mood on Pier 17, tense, expectant, and a little bit haunted. Naval officers stood in formation at a safe distance from the USS Harridan, clipboards in hand, radios clipped to their belts. Technicians milled about, whispering guesses, placing mental bets, and at the center of it all stood Admiral Walter Grayson. He was silent, eyes fixed on the worn silhouette of the destroyer, like a man staring down an old enemy. For him, this wasn't just about an engine. It was about reputation, pride, and the embarrassment of putting faith in someone the Navy had never considered one of theirs. A civilian. A woman. A 40-year-old mechanic with no advanced degree. Asterisk, a few feet away, Lena Torres stood calm and ready, sleeves rolled up, a streak of black oil across her forearm. Her face was tired but alive, not with adrenaline, but with that rare, quiet confidence that comes only when you know you've already done the impossible. Asterisk, Marcy Kim, beside her, tightened the bolt on the final support casing, then gave a thumbs up. Fuel integrity nominal. All readings within safe threshold. It's now or never, she said, voice steady despite the nerves in her eyes. Asterisk, Lena nodded. She didn't need fanfare or ceremony. All she wanted was for the Harridan to speak for herself. Asterisk, she stepped onto the gangway, where a security officer handed her a radio. They want a countdown, he muttered, clearly skeptical. Lena took the radio without a word. Asterisk in the control chamber, once filled with analog gauges and brass switches, now fused with a few modern diagnostic patches. Lena sat in the command chair. Her hand hovered over the ignition panel. This wasn't a simple key turn. It was a sequence, a rhythm. The Harridan's engine didn't respond to brute force or automation. It needed to be awakened in stages, like warming a cold heart. Asterisk over the PA, Lena's voice rang out, initializing phase 1, pressure stabilization, confirming harmonic alignment. Asterisk, the officers outside watched, stone-faced, as the hull of the ship emitted a low metallic groan. Some shifted uncomfortably. A few turned to the Admiral, who remained motionless, jaw tight. Asterisk inside, Lena's eyes darted from gauge to gauge. Steam hissed through newly cleared valves. Green lights flickered. One by one, systems that hadn't been active in over a decade came online. Asterisk phase 2, she said. Starting magnetic resonance loop. Asterisk the engine room, deep in the ship's belly, began to vibrate softly, like a cello string being drawn tight. Lena held her breath. This was where every team before her had failed. The loop would misalign, create feedback, and blow the whole system offline. But Lena had recalibrated the original inductors using Watkins' handwritten notes, balancing the frequency within 3/10,000ths of a decimal. Asterisk, the vibrations smoothed out. A deep, rising hum began to build beneath her feet. Asterisk outside, the Admiral's expression shifted for the first time. Not awe, not yet. Just confusion. Asterisk, phase 3, Lena said, quietly now. Engaging main turbine. Ignition in 5, 4, 3, 2. She pressed the final switch. For one long second, nothing happened. Then, a roar. Not an explosion, not a malfunction. A controlled, thunderous surge that rolled across the dock like the growl of a waking giant. The ground trembled. Birds scattered into the sky. The Harridan shuddered once, then leveled as her engine came fully alive for the first time since 1998. Asterisk inside the control room. Lena sat frozen, not in shock, but in reverence. The sound, the feeling, the sheer presence of the engines. Filled every space inside her body like a second heartbeat. Asterisk outside, the officers erupted in chaos. Radios crackled, voices shouted. Asterisk, she did it. Asterisk, engine is online. Asterisk, holy hell, it's stable, look at those readings. Asterisk, but Admiral. Grayson said nothing. He walked slowly to the edge of the pier, eyes locked on the Harridan. The exhaust from her twin stacks now billowed evenly, not as smoke, but as pure, filtered mist. She wasn't just running. She was purring. Asterisk Marcy ran up the dock, grinning like a kid. Stabilizers are perfect. Diagnostics report 97% efficiency. That's better than the 1985 benchmark. Asterisk Lena finally stepped off the gangway, calmly walking to the Admiral. She wasn't smiling. This moment wasn't about celebration. It was about recognition, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, overlooked. Asterisk Grayson stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Asterisk. I don't understand, he muttered. They said it was too far gone. The last team said there was no way. Asterisk Lena folded her arms. They didn't listen to the ship. They treated it like a computer. This engine wasn't built by code. It was built by feel, by instinct. You needed someone who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. Asterisk, he frowned, clearly uncomfortable. We'll have to debrief. The Pentagon's going to want answers. And if this tech is truly restorable, Asterisk Lena cut in gently. You don't need to understand everything today, Admiral. Just remember who brought this engine back to life. There was a long silence, and to everyone's astonishment, Admiral Grayson extended his hand. Asterisk Lena hesitated only a moment before shaking it. His grip was firm, his voice softer now. Miss Torres, I've spent 30 years commanding fleets. I thought I'd seen it all. Asterisk, you hadn't, Lena said. But now you have. Asterisk. As the Harridan's engine continued its deep, rumbling song behind them, word of the miracle spread across the base. Engineers, reporters, even a few retired veterans began to gather. The ship that had been written off as a fossil now stood tall, reborn, not because of cutting-edge tech, but because one woman refused to let it die. Asterisk. In the following weeks, Lena was called to Washington, interviewed on military panels, and offered consulting contracts she had once only dreamed of. But she wasn't interested in fame. Asterisk. She turned most of them down. Asterisk. Instead, she returned to the shipyards, this time not as a technician, but as the head of her own engineering group. She hired women, veterans, dropouts, and hands-on mechanics who were tired of being told they weren't real engineers. She named her group Project Harridan, and their motto was simple. Asterisk. We rebuild what they abandon. Asterisk. And the Admiral? Asterisk. Well, he didn't talk much about that morning on Pier 17, but those who served under him said his tone changed when he spoke to his teams. He started asking more questions. He started listening. Asterisk. And on the wall of his office, quietly framed in glass, hung a single image. Lena Torres standing on the deck of the USS Harridan, arms crossed, engine smoke curling into the sky behind her. Asterisk. The caption below read, "She said it wasn't impossible. We just never asked the right woman."